Hey guys, tonight we're going way back before cities had electricity. Before anyone had the concept of breakfast cereal, and definitely before anyone thought to put chia seeds in a smoothie. You find yourself stepping through the heavy wooden door of a medieval castle kitchen, the kind that smells permanently of smoke, onions, and hard decisions. A soot-stained hearth crackles with a sleepy fire, and above it, a black iron cauldron hangs like it's been waiting for you for centuries. The air is cold. Stone walls do not do warmth well, and your fingers are stiff as you nudge the door closed behind you. Inside, the flickering candlelight casts long shadows on the walls, making them dance in ways you can't quite trust. A wooden table squats in the center of the room, nicked and stained with generations of unexciting meals. And beside it, the cuckoo might also be the town gossip, the gardener, and someone's uncle grunts softly and hands you a wooden spoon that smells faintly of old garlic and secrets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Midnight in Rio, 3 a.m. in Madrid. I want to know now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk up to the fire and notice a series of bowls laid out across the tables and made of clay, others wooden, and one that might be an old turnip someone hollowed out for fun. Inside the bowls, dry grains, shriveled herbs, a handful of barley, something that might be a root, or might be a desiccated mouse tail. It's unclear. This is not the glamorous part of history. This is the soft underbelly, the slow, heavy, porridge-filled rhythm of survival. Before bread was daily, there was gruel, porridge, mush, just enough warmth to get you through another cold night with straw in your bed, and probably a mouse or two under it. Your first culinary experiment, oats and water, that's it. No sugar, no cinnamon, just grains and effort. You stir the pot gently, feeling the texture thicken into something between paste and perseverance. The smell is earthy smoke, oat husk, and whatever lived in this pot before you got here. Widely known historical fact. In much of medieval Europe, oats were the go-to grain for the poor and for monks, particularly in Britain and Ireland. Cheap, filling, and forgiving if you forgot to stir it for a few minutes. Eccentric curiosity, some Irish monks were known to eat cold porridge in total silence, believing that suffering through flavorless meals built character or at least kept unnecessary conversations to a minimum. Historians still debate whether oat porridge was sometimes used in small religious rituals, or whether that was just a convenient excuse not to share it. You scoop a spoonful into a simple wooden bowl. The steam rises slowly, catching the light just enough to look dramatic. You blow gently. The first bite tastes like if drywall were warm and yet oddly comforting. The kind of comfort that whispers you'll get through the night. Probably, you sit down. The fire snaps. Outside, the wind howls through the narrow castle windows. But here, inside this smoky room full of faded smells and half-forgotten recipes, everything slows. The porridge sticks to your spoon and your ribs. Your thoughts begin to wander, and this is only the beginning. You stretch your shoulders and rise from the creaky stool. Your spoon is still warm from the oat porridge, and so is your curiosity. Across the table, there's a new ingredient waiting for you in a cloth, sack-cracked wheat, not flour, not bread. Cracked wheat. Grain broken with stone. Not quite uniform, not quite clean. It's dusty, jagged, and full of possibilities. You pour it into the same pot, now wiped clean with a rag that has definitely seen better centuries. A fresh start, a new flavor. Hopefully, this time, you're in a monastery, a quiet, orderly place. You can practically feel the silence seeping into your bones. The cook here wears a simple robe and says absolutely nothing. He gestures toward a jug of goat's milk and a small jar of honey. Apparently, that's your ingredient list. No salt, no spice. Just you, the wheat, the milk, and whatever the bees were feeling when they made that honey. You stir slowly. The grains resist at first, clumping together like monks avoiding confession. But with time, the mixture begins to soften. You watch the bubbles rise, slow and steady, like thoughts during meditation. Widely known historical fact, medieval monasteries were centers of agriculture and food production. Monks grew their own food, made their own bread, and yes, ate a lot of porridge. It was humble, filling, and matched their vows of simplicity, eccentric curiosity. Some monastic cookbooks included porridge recipes, using rose petals and sour apple vinegar. The result? Something that probably tasted like heartbreak in a bowl, but apparently cured melancholy, or caused it. Historians still debate whether monks truly enjoyed these meals or endured them as spiritual discipline. Some texts hint that honey and milk were luxuries reserved for special feast days, not everyday breakfast. You drizzle a little of that dark, floral honey into the porridge. The aroma changes suddenly, sweeter, deeper, like someone whispered a secret into the pot. You taste it. The cracked wheat still has bite, but the milk smooths the edges. It's not delicious, exactly. It's more steadying, like being wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep and incense. The monk watches you, silently. He places a single preserved fig beside your bowl. A gift, a warning. Hard to say. You eat in slow bites, each spoonful heavy and grounding. The walls around you feel thicker now, like the monastery has wrapped itself around you. You are safe, full, a little sleepy. You set your spoon down. The fire is lower now, the shadows taller. Somewhere down the hall, a bell rings softly, calling the monks to evening prayer. But you're staying right here with the cracked wheat, the warm milk, and the quiet that settles like dust across the stone floor. You're still in the monastery kitchen, the warmth of the cracked wheat porridge lingering in your chest like the afterglow of a mediocre but well-meaning hug. The monk has gone, silent as ever, leaving behind a new bowl on the table. You peer into it. It's filled with barley pale, polished, and somehow looking more optimistic than the other grains. Barley has hope in it. Or maybe that's just your stomach talking. You scoop a generous handful into the pot and add water from a clay jug, then hesitate. There's a small wooden box nearby, and when you lift the lid, you're met with the sharp, green scent of dried apple slices, wild apples, more tart than sweet, probably picked from trees that grow with more spite than sunlight. You toss in a few slices, for texture, for bravery. This isn't the porridge of prayer. This is the porridge of peasants. You're in a modest countryside cottage now, a thin thatched roof above your head, and a breeze sneaking in through every crack it can find. The fire is smaller, more temperamental. The wooden spoon you're using is chipped and splintered, but loyal. The barley cooks slowly, releasing that familiar, grainy, smell-warm, earthy, comforting in the way a damp wool sock is comforting after. The initial disgust wears off. You stir the pot like you mean it. Not because the recipe demands it, but because it gives your hands something to do while the day fades outside the single soot-smudged window. Widely known historical fact: barley was one of the most commonly grown grains in medieval Europe, especially for the poor. It was used in bread, beer, and of course, thick porridges that could stretch for days if necessary. Eccentric curiosity: some households would roast the barley slightly over the fire before boiling it to give the porridge a nutty flavor though. Some accounts suggest it mostly just tasted like smoke and regret. Historians still debate whether these peasant porridges ever included fruit, or if the apples and berries often mentioned in texts were more seasonal luxuries than standard ingredients. The apples begin to soften in the pot, their tartness mellowing as they dissolve into the grain. The smell changes slightly sweet, vaguely medicinal, and somehow familiar, like an old drawer of winter clothes that still carries the scent of pine needles and lost time. You dip a spoon in. It's thick, hearty, and a little chewy. The barley isn't trying to impress anyone. It's just doing its job, filling your belly, quieting your nerves, and giving you an excuse to sit by the fire just a little longer. The cottage creaks in the wind. You imagine a dog curled up near the door, a candle guttering on the shelf, and maybe a child sleeping in the corner, wrapped in a blanket made from someone else's old cloak. This is a slow evening, a barley evening, a do-nothing buchu evening. You add a pinch of salt, just one. It brings out the flavor, or maybe it just reminds your tongue to pay attention. Another spoonful. You chew, slowly, thoughtfully. You begin to wonder if maybe the whole world is rushing for no reason, and the real secret to peace is somewhere between barley and apples. The fire cracks, the wind settles, the porridge thickens further, and your thoughts grow foggy, and you're not in a hurry to leave. Your fingers are sticky with barley and apple, but the fire's still going, and your curiosity hasn't cooled. You glance across the kitchen, or what passes for a kitchen in this crumbling cottage, and spot a small basket filled with dusty, slightly shriveled herbs. Next to it is a jug of goat's milk and another bowl of grains. You lift the lid and smile. More barley, but this time it's been pre-soaked, already soft to the touch. Someone was planning ahead. The smell of yesterday's porridge still lingers in the air, a mix of warm grain and extinguished fire. You wipe out the pot and start again, a fresh batch, but this time with something new. You pick through the herbs and find what looks like Angelica rutan herb, once believed to cure nearly everything, from melancholy to the plague. You toss in a few slices. Why not? If it doesn't soothe your soul, maybe it'll at least confuse your taste buds. Then comes the milk. It hisses when it hits the hot pot, curling in wisps of steam. The barley begins to bubble lazily. You stir. The Angelica floats to the surface, like it's not entirely committed to being part of this dot after a few minutes. You remember the small tin of nutmeg tucked behind a dusty jug. Nutmeg wasn't cheap in the Middle Ages. In fact, it was so expensive at one point that people were mugged for carrying it. You grate a bit in any way, watching the brown specks melt into the porridge like secrets disappearing into old letters. Widely known historical fact: nutmeg, once worth more than gold by weight, made its way to Europe through long, dangerous trade. Roots: its presence in a recipe often marked the meal as something elevated, even luxurious. Eccentric curiosity: some medieval physicians believed that nutmeg, combined with warm milk, could calm nightmares or even induce prophetic dreams. Others just liked how it covered the taste of slightly spoiled food. Historians still debate whether Angelica was used more for its supposed medicinal properties or simply because it grew aggressively in monastery gardens and no one knew what else to do with it. You take a sip, the flavor is strange. Not unpleasant dash, just ... unexpected. The barley has a creamy texture now, the milk softening its bite. The Angelica adds something herbal and slightly bitter, like chewing on an old prayer. And the nutmeg. It floats in at the end, warming your throat like a bedtime story whispered by someone who probably once lit incense in every room of their house. You pour a second bowl, watching the steam swirl as if it has something to say. The cottage is quieter now, or maybe you're just sinking deeper into the rhythm of slow cooking. Slow breathing, slow everything. Outside, the wind has died. The fire has settled into a deep, steady glow. You feel it in your spine, in your fingertips, in the way your eyelids are beginning to weigh more than the spoon in your hand. You stretch out your legs beside the hearth. The smell of barley and spice clings to your sleeves. You imagine this is what comfort would have smelled like in the 14th century. Not luxury, not indulgence, just warmth, just enough. And as the last bite slides past your tongue, you wonder if maybe Angelica root really does quiet the mind, or if you're just ready to sleep now, soothed by the hum of history and a bowl of thick, herbal mush. Either way, you lean back and let yourself drift a little. You wake slowly, not from sleep, exactly, but from the kind of drifting that barley and milk tend to encourage. The fire still crackles. Your limbs are heavy, pleasantly so, and for a moment you wonder if you've been here for minutes or centuries. The cottage hasn't changed, though the light outside the small window is softer now. Slipping toward dusk, you stretch your back and turn toward a new set of ingredients arranged on the table. There's a jug of cloudy water, a bundle of herbs, tied with twine, and something unexpected, a small bundle of dried fish. You blink, fish, indeed. Your next recipe, apparently, is porridge with a twist, one that smells faintly of brine and bold decisions. You reach for the sack of grain beside the jug. It's coarse and greyish rye, possibly, or maybe even millet. Definitely something that looks like it's had a hard life. You pour the grain into the pot, add the water and stir. Slowly, methodically. The dried fish waits on the table like it's daring you to follow through. So you do. You drop it into the bubbling pot, along with chopped leeks and a few cloves of garlic that looked like they've seen better centuries. A pinch of salt, a sprig of thyme from the bundle, and there it is, breakfast, lunch, or punishment, depending on who you ask. Widely known historical fact in Northern Europe, especially Scandinavia and parts of the British Isles, porridge was often savory rather than sweet, dried or salted. Fish was a common addition, especially near the coasts or during fasting days when meat was off the table. Eccentric curiosity, there's record of porridge being served with pickled herring, vinegar, and even fermented whey in some monastic communities. Monks were dedicated, disciplined, and possibly flavor-deaf. Historians still debate whether these fish porridges were meant to be practical, penitential, or somehow genuinely enjoyed. One medieval recipe from Iceland reads more like a challenge than a meal. You stir the pot as the fish softens, melting into the broth. The scent is pungent but oddly satisfying, like something you'd smell after surviving a storm at sea. The leeks begin to break down, the garlic sweetens slightly in the heat, and the rye grains burst open one by one with soft little sighs. You dip in a spoon and take a bite. The taste is strong, salty, earthy, somehow clean and grimy at the same time. It's a flavor that doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives, drops its boots at the door, and makes itself at home. You chew slowly. It's not the kind of porridge you'd post on social media, if medieval peasants had social media. It's the kind of porridge you eat after hauling firewood, all morning or repairing a fishing net with numb fingers. It's filling. Honest, it tells the truth in a language your stomach understands. You sit back, a thin curl of steam rises from the pot like a ribbon, twisting upward and vanishing into the rafters. The cottage is still. The outside world might as well be 1,000 years away, and yet, here you are at peace, somehow, with the smell of salted fish clinging to your sleeves and your heart beating in the steady rhythm of the boil. You add a final pinch of thyme, just to be fancy. The kind of flourish that says, yes, this is porridge, but it's my porridge. Then you sit, letting the warmth fill your chest again, and you realize you haven't thought about the passage of time in a while. That's okay. In here, time stirs as slowly as you do. You don't even bother standing up this time. Your legs have surrendered to the fire's warmth, and honestly, so has your spirit. You sit there, staring into the bottom of your now empty bowl, wondering how something as strange as fish porridge could make you feel so grounded. It wasn't good, exactly, but it made sense. Then, from the corner of your eye, you notice a new ingredient waiting for you on the table. Saffron, just a few delicate strands, cradled in a small dish like something sacred. And beside it, a handful of crushed almonds, a jug of thin cream, and could it be, a sack of finely ground white rice. This is no peasant's meal. You're not in the cottage anymore. You're somewhere fancier. A manor, perhaps. A stone hall with actual windows and floors that don't squeak in protest. The kitchen here smells cleaner. The fire is hot but obedient. The cook wears sleeves. You pour the rice into a new pot and add the cream, watching it swirl like silk. Then the almonds go in crushed fine, like they've been in. Finally, the saffron, just a pinch. It blooms in the cream like sunlight, trapped underwater. Yellow gold magic. You stir slowly, carefully. The rice begins to plump, taking on the richness of the cream, the nuttiness of the almonds, and that strange, floral, whispering presence of saffron. This isn't porridge for survival. This is porridge for status, widely known historical fact. In medieval Europe, particularly in noble courts, saffron and almonds were symbols of wealth. Rice was an imported delicacy, and any dish combining all three was considered luxurious and likely reserved for feasts or high-ranking guests. Eccentric curiosity, some royal kitchens kept their saffron under lock and key, with cooks required to account for every missing strand. There are records of cooks being fined or worse for misplacing saffron. Culinary crimes were taken seriously. Historians still debate whether dishes like this almond saffron rice pudding were actually eaten as full meals or simply served in small portions, like edible jewelry, just to impress guests. You dip in a spoon. The rice is soft but still has shape. The cream is thick, the saffron mysterious. The almonds hum quietly in the background, like lute music in a tapestry room. It's sweet, rich, and strangely delicate. You take another bite and imagine a nobleman, in a velvet robe, pretending not to slurp. Across the hall, someone's playing chess poorly. The lady of the manor sighs theatrically. The cook wipes sweat from his brow, wondering if the almond ratio is correct enough to avoid reprimand. You're just here for the pudding. This is the kind of dish that would have been discussed at the table, not just eaten. A meal that says, look how far this grain has traveled. Look what we turned it into. A plate of stories, of ingredients, that crossed oceans and borders just to arrive in this spoonful. You take a third bite, a fourth. You lean back. The cream clings to the inside of the bowl, the saffron painting faint golden rings where the porridge once sat. You look at your spoon like it's done something noble. Outside, the sky has dimmed further. The kitchen glows softly, now lit by firelight and memory. You feel full, not just in your stomach, but in your sense of calm. There's something oddly poetic about eating something this extravagant in silence, and there's still more to come. The aftertaste of almonds and saffron still lingers, soft and floral on your tongue, as you notice the next ingredients being laid out. Only this time, they don't whisper elegance or refinement. No, these are ingredients that grunt. They arrive with the faint aroma of salt, fatigue, and let's just get through winter. You're back in a coastal village, now windswept grey. The kind of place where everything smells vaguely of rope and damp wool. The kitchen here is smaller, darker, and has the permanent vibe of things being mended. Before you sits a wooden bowl filled with day-old bread, torn into chunks. Stale doesn't quite cover, it's hard enough to make a dent in your spoon. Next to it, a jug of sour ale, a few wild onions, and surprise, again another dried fish. Smaller this time, and more judgmental. You're about to make what might generously be called a survival porridge. A dish born not of inspiration, but necessity. You heat a pot over a low fire and pour in the sour ale. It bubbles with a smell that might take some emotional preparation. You add water to soften the sting, then toss in the bread. It begins to melt into a thick, lumpy mash. Then go with the chopped onions, followed by crumbled fish and a healthy pinch of salt, probably the only seasoning anyone had faith in back then. Widely known historical fact: in times of famine, war, or harsh winters, medieval cooks often made porridge from whatever they had owed: bread, leftover stock, or even small fish soaked in brine. These meals were often communal, cooked in large pots for entire households or villages. Eccentric curiosity: some accounts from 14th century coastal settlements mention people adding seawater directly into their pots when salt was scarce, leading to porridge with personality. Others just called it a learning experience. Historians still debate whether these bread and fish porridges were considered meals or merely a way to avoid wasting ingredients. Some suggest they also carried superstitious significance, believed to ward off illness when herbs or spices were added. The mash in your pot thickens quickly, the bread disintegrating into a paste, the onions softening until they vanish completely. The fish flakes apart and releases its briny aroma into the mix. It's not pretty, it's not graceful, but there's something honest about it. You take a bite, it's chewy, salty, a little sharp, but not unpleasant. Like a story told by an old sailor who's seen too much but still laughs at the waves. You chew slowly, the warmth spreading through your chest. It's not comfort food in the modern sense. There's no melted cheese, no cinnamon, but it comforts something deeper. A survival instinct. A connection to people who made do with what they had, and somehow kept going. You stir what's left in the pot. The porridge clings to the sides like it doesn't want to be forgotten. You feel a strange affection for it, for the stubbornness it represents, for the simplicity of its existence. Outside, the sea wind howls, slipping through the cracks in the wooden walls. But inside, the fire holds steady. You're warm, you're full, And you're starting to understand that porridge at its core isn't about flavor, it's about staying. You wipe your spoon clean, more out of ritual than necessity. The fire crackles lazily behind you, and the shadows on the walls dance with a little more elegance, now perhaps inspired by the saffron, or maybe just in appreciation of your commitment to seeing this journey through. Either way, the kitchen is quiet again, until it isn't. You hear laughter, not from this room, but from the one beyond. A feast hall, boots on stone, goblets clinking, the faint sound of someone bragging about falconry. You're in a manor, now a proper one. The kind with banners on the walls and dogs under every table, waiting for scraps. You step through a carved archway and into the flickering warmth of candlelight and overcooked meat. And there, on the banquet table, not next to the pheasant or the roast pig butt, tucked neatly beside a silver ewer of wine, is a bowl of porridge. It's golden, creamy. It sparkles faintly. It is unmistakably rich people porridge. You return to the kitchen, now more bustling, more polished. A young cook hands you the ingredients. Arborio-style rice, yes. Imported ground almonds, powdered sugar, a few slivers of preserved lemon, and a splash of rosewater. The final touch, a thread of gold leaf for decoration. You don't ask if it's edible. At this point, everything seems to be widely known historical fact. In noble courts during the later medieval period, rice puddings and sweet porridge dishes became fashionable among the wealthy. They were symbols of refinement, a chance to show off rare ingredients like sugar, citrus, and spices from the East. Eccentric curiosity, one English noblewoman is said to have served sweet porridge with crushed pearls during her wedding feast. Historians believe this was either a bold culinary statement or a dangerous misunderstanding of digestion. Historians still debate how often these extravagant dishes were actually consumed versus displayed. Some believe many were made primarily to impress guests or to serve symbolic roles in feast pageants. You begin to cook. The rice simmers slowly in milk, almonds thickening the base. You stir in sugar, tasting as you go, adjusting the sweetness like a painter adding light to a canvas. Then, gently, the preserved lemon. It brightens everything. And finally, a drop or two of rosewater. It doesn't smell like food. It smells like a memory of a garden or a letter never sent. You ladle the finished porridge into a porcelain bowl. It's so rich it barely moves when you tilt it. You add the gold leaf. It flutters like an apology before settling on the surface. You take a bite. It's absurdly smooth, creamy, delicate. The almonds whisper. The rosewater haunts. The lemon arrives at the end, like a clever joke you almost didn't catch. It's beautiful, and yet, somehow, less satisfying than the barley and fish. It's too perfect, too careful. You imagine a lord and lady eating this without smiling, too busy discussing inheritance and diplomacy. The porridge is flawless, but it lacks the mess, the survival, the small triumphs of figuring things out with half a leak and stubborn optimism. Still, you eat the rest, because it's warm, because it took time, because someone once sat by a fire, just like you, and decided this was the best they could offer the world that night, and in the end, that's more than enough. You push the empty bowl aside, letting your fingers trail over its smooth porcelain rim. Fancy porridge leaves less to chew on both literally and emotionally. But the next recipe promises something different. Less sparkle, more smoke. Something born in hardship and stirred with calloused hands. You're no longer in a manor. You're back outside, where the wind bites harder and the world feels smaller. A modest stone hut stands at the edge of what looks like a village recovering from something. Plague, perhaps, or war, or simply a long winter that overstayed its welcome. Inside, the kitchen is barely a room. The fire is weak, the air thin, but someone's already left the ingredients out, as if expecting you. There's no grain this time, just old bread, dry as bone, and a jug of watery broth made from boiled greens, a few wilted herbs, a little fat skimmed off some previous meal. That's all, and yet, this was a meal that got people through dark days. You break the bread into small pieces and toss it into a pot, pouring the broth over it. The bread soaks slowly, softening into a mash that doesn't quite qualify as solid or liquid. You stir. The mixture thickens into something familiar, though not exactly comforting. Widely known historical fact. During outbreaks of plague or famine, many medieval families resorted to pottage or porridge, made from leftover bread, scraps of bone, broth, and foraged herbs. It was about survival, not taste. Eccentric curiosity. Some written accounts from the 14th century suggest families would intentionally age their bread for porridge, believing it held up better when boiled and added less bitterness to the meal. It didn't, but they believed it did. Historians still debate whether these improvised porridges were common across social classes during crises, or if the nobility managed to shield themselves with better stockpiles. Some evidence suggests that, for a few months at least, everyone ate like peasants. The smell is faint damp bread, weak greens, a hint of something sour. You take a bite. It doesn't taste like much, but it fills the belly. It tells a story of resourcefulness, of staying alive with nothing but crumbs and hot water. You close your eyes and imagine the silence of those long nights, villagers curled up in corners, bowls in hand, listening to the wind and trying not to think about who didn't make it through last week. There's something humbling about this meal, something that slows your thoughts down, grounding you. It asks for nothing but attention. You stir what's left in the pot. It bubbles thickly, like it's trying to remember its own ingredients. You eat slowly, spoon by spoon, until the bowl is clean. And in that stillness, you feel gratitude. Not for the flavor, but for the warmth, for the fire, for the quiet. Sometimes, that's all you need. The fire sighs as you push your bowl aside, the last traces of broth and bread clinging to the sides, like memories that won't quite fade. Your hands are warm now, your shoulders slouched in that slow motion kind of peace only porridge and flickering light can bring. But there's another sack on the table, and you know what that means. You untie the drawstring and peer inside. Rye, dark, stubborn, and heavy. Rye was never anyone's favorite child in the medieval pantry, but it was reliabliss, especially in colder climates where wheat didn't thrive. Next to the sack sits a jar of ground bark. Yes, bark. And on the far corner of the table, a single turnip. You're beginning to sense this one's going to be ... ambitious. You pour the rye grains into the pot and add water. Not too much this kind of porridge likes to fight back. The grains clump and sulk. You slice the turnip thin and toss it in. Then comes the bark. It smells faintly of cinnamon, but less confident. Like cinnamon's awkward cousin, you stir. The mixture turns grayish-brown, like wet clay left out in the rain. It thickens quickly, sticking to the spoon like it doesn't want to let go. Widely known historical fact, Rye was a staple grain in Eastern and Northern Europe during the medieval period, particularly in regions where wheat was too expensive or too hard to grow. It was known for its earthy flavor and its ability to last through long, cold seasons. Eccentric curiosity. Some households experimented with tree bark in their porridges, not just out of desperation, but because certain types were believed to have cleansing properties. Spoiler, they mostly had chewy properties. Historians still debate whether these bark-infused porridges were actually consumed frequently or mentioned more in survival texts. Some believe they were occasional experiments gone wrong that somehow made it into family lore. You take a careful bite. It's complex. The rye is nutty and bold. The turnip adds a sharpness that startles the back of your tongue. And the bark, well, it's still there. Fibrous, unapologetic. It's not the kind of dish that begs for seconds. It's the kind that stands with arms crossed, waiting for your respect. And strangely, you give it. Because this was the kind of porridge served when winter dragged on too long. When the cellar was nearly empty. When meals were made from a combination of resilience and sheer stubborn hope. You stir again. The porridge looks dense, but there's something meditative about it. Like chewing on the forest floor during a prayer. You keep going, spoonful after spoonful, as the wind picks up outside and taps against the wooden slats. There's no sweetness in this bowl, no comfort, really, but there is truth, and sometimes that's more filling than sugar ever could be. You finish the last bite. The bark resists to the end. You don't mind. You're stronger now. You lean back, letting the last of the rye porridge settle like a stone in your belly. That one didn't whisper bedtime stories, it lectured. But the fire's still burning, and the table still holds more mysteries in mismatched bowls. This next one is peculiar. You spot a small sack of dried fruits, shriveled prunes, a handful of figs, and what might be a very determined apricot. Next to them, coarse brown sugar, a jug of diluted wine, and curiously a tiny clay bottle of vinegar. You blink. Vinegar. Yes. Tonight's porridge isn't here to be liked. It's here to make a statement. You pour the wine into the pot. It fizzes faintly, sour and sweet all at once. Then go the chopped fruits, tossed in with reckless optimism. The sugar follows, along with a splash of vinegar, just enough to make your eyes question your hands. The aroma that rises is bold, assertive, like someone wearing far too much perfume to the wrong kind of party. This porridge, you sense, was not a daily staple. It was a performance, the kind of dish brought out during festivals or family gatherings, maybe as a challenge. Eat it if you dare. And if you smiled while chewing, you earned bragging rights. Widely known historical fact, sweet porridges using dried fruit and wine were often reserved for feast days, religious celebrations, or periods of abundance. They were common across both Christian and Islamic medieval cultures, using what preserved ingredients were available. Eccentric curiosity. Some recipes from 13th century Iberia mixed porridge with vinegar-soaked plums and called it a digestive aid. Others described it as a punishment for gluttony. Hard to say which was more accurate. Historians still debate whether these vinegar-based porridges were truly meant to be eaten, or if they functioned more like ceremonial dishes offered, tasted, and left unfinished for symbolic reasons. The pot begins to thicken, the dried fruits softening, releasing their syrupy essence into the wine. The smell is surprisingly pleasant now, sour, sweet, rich, with just a whisper of rebellion You take a bite. The figs melt on your tongue. The sugar lingers, and then there it is, the vinegar. Sharp, abrupt, like biting into a conversation you weren't ready for, but the balance holds. Somehow it works. Not delicious, but captivating. Each spoonful feels like folklore. You imagine a table full of people grimacing through the first bites, then going back for seconds just to prove something. A dish that tested your patience and your palate. You chew slowly, the prunes dissolving into the porridge like shadows, into dusk. The wine has cooked down into something mellow, almost tender, and the vinegar, it keeps you awake, keeps your thoughts from drifting too far. You set your spoon down halfway through, not because you're full, but because this one asks to be respected in small doses. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Outside, night has fully arrived, and with it, a hush, a peace. You glance back at the pot. There's plenty left, but you leave it. Some porridges are meant to challenge, not comfort. To remind you that even in celebration, medieval cuisine likes to keep you on your toes. And yet, you smile, because even weird food has its place. You're not quite sure how to follow vinegar porridge. It feels like the culinary equivalent of being scolded and hugged at the same time. But as always, the table provides. And this time, it brings you somewhere completely different. You're outside now, in the heart of a busy medieval marketplace. You can hear it, the hum of voices, the clink of coins, the thump of hooves on cobblestones. Stalls packed with turnips, onions, suspicious cheeses, and of course cauldrons. You walk toward one, drawn by a smell that's neither sweet nor savory, just thick, hearty, and a little chaotic. The vendor smiles, a tooth or two missing, and ladles something from an enormous pot into a shell. Not a bowl, a shell, probably from a turtle. You don't ask questions. He calls it lamban saji grom. You don't speak the dialect, but you get the feeling it translates roughly to grainy mess of who knows what. You look inside. Barley, yes. Lentils, definitely. Shreds of what might be parsnip. A bit of animal fat glistens near the top, and something green, maybe leek, maybe optimism. You take it back to your fire and recreate the recipe, using what you find nearby. Into your pot go equal parts barley and lentils, a hunk of aged root vegetable, wild greens, and enough lard to make your modern arteries whisper a quiet protest. Widely known, historical fact, street food in medieval towns often came in the form of thick stews and grain-based porridges sold in portable vessels, shells, flatbread, or even leaves. They were cheap, filling, and just mysterious enough to keep things interesting, eccentric curiosity in certain towns. Porridge vendors were assigned specific corners so customers wouldn't confuse their gruel styles. Some were known for being overly salted, others for surprise chunks. Historians still debate whether these porridges were standardized recipes passed down through families, or improvised daily with whatever was left over or discounted from nearby stalls. The mixture bubbles to life quickly. The lentils break down first, giving the porridge a smooth backbone. The barley holds its shape, burly. The greens wilt into invisibility. The fat shimmers on top like a victory banner. You stir and sniff. The aroma is robust, layered, familiar in a way you can't quite explain. Like a rainy day meal your great-great-grandmother might have made had she owned 3 ingredients and a willingness to experiment. You taste, it's good, really good, like the kind of good that doesn't need compliments. It just is. It's the porridge equivalent of a tight handshake from someone who survived 2 wars and still bakes bread on Sundays. You keep eating, each bite dense but satisfying. There's a rhythm here, a confidence. You imagine people eating this with one hand while bartering with the other, scooping the last bits with crusts of bread, sharing glances that say, "Not bad today." This was porridge for the people. Honest, unfiltered. The medieval version of fast food if fast. Food had fiber and centuries of peasant wisdom. You scrape the last bit from your bowl. A lentil clings to the rim. You let it stay. It's earned. The right then you lean back and sigh. The fire crackles its approval. Outside, the imaginary market winds down. The crowd fades. The world softens. And you, full of lambanka and lightly salted hope, are once again completely still. The market fades into silence. Just embers now, dancing faintly in the hearth beside you. Your body is still, but your mind wanders to darker corners of the countryside where the porridge wasn't sold or shared or even spoken of too loudly. You're in a rural village now, remote, hidden among tangled woods and quiet superstition. The kind of place where recipes are passed down not through books, but whispers. Before you on the table, a small pot, blackened from years of open flames. A jug of thin wine, a satchel of foraged mushrooms, dried and slightly questionably, and sprig of something that looks more magical than edible. Next to it all, a handful of spelt. You know this porridge already feels different, not by the ingredients, but by the air. This one wasn't made for taste. It was made for ritual, for preparation, for something. You heat the wine first, letting it simmer into a scent that's half warmth, half warning. The mushrooms go in, rehydrating slowly, releasing an earthy aroma that's equal parts forest floor and old secrets. You add the spelt, then the herb, no label, just belief. Stirring, always clockwise. Widely known historical fact. Spelt, one of the oldest cultivated grains, was used widely in Europe before wheat became dominant. It was hardy, reliable, and often found in both porridge and bread. Eccentric. Curiosity. Some medieval recipes, especially those from remote regions, called for ingredients considered to have protective properties. Fungi, herbs like mugwort, and even small animal bones were sometimes simmered into meals, not just for nourishment, but for charm or cure. Historians still debate whether these so-called protective porridges were remnants of pre-Christian rituals or simply rustic medicine wrapped in folklore. Few written records survive, but oral traditions hint at deeper roots. The mixture thickens, slowly, and the smell deepens. The mushrooms break down into soft flecks, the wine reduces into a dark syrup, and the herb, whatever it was, lends a curious sharpness, the kind of flavor you can feel between your eyes. You taste it, it's powerful. Not spicy, not salty dash, just ... present. Like a song in a minor key. It doesn't dance on your tongue, it plants its feet. Earthy, bitter, and oddly grounding. A flavor you wouldn't crave, but would remember. You take another bite. The warmth spreads through your limbs, not like comfort food, but like something older. The fire beside you feels brighter. The air feels heavier. For a brief moment, you could swear the shadows in the room have shifted slightly. You close your eyes. You picture villagers huddled together around a fire, bowls in their laps, eating in silence. Not for hunger, not for joy, but for meaning. For strength, maybe it worked. Maybe it didn't, but it felt like it did. You finish the bowl, slower than usual. Each spoonful feels like a step into mossy woods, soft and ancient. When the last bit is gone, you set the spoon down carefully, quietly. You lean back, listening to the stillness. Outside, the wind stirs the trees, or maybe just your imagination. Either way, the fire holds. You're safe, wrapped in grain and ritual, and whatever that herb was, it's working. You're not sure how long you sat like that, half closed, bowl empty, thoughts soft around the edges. The memory of the mushroom porridge lingers not just on your tongue, but somewhere deeper, like you swallowed part of the forest itself. But now, the table has shifted once more. The air feels expectant. Tonight's porridge is ceremonial, not magical, not medicinal, just important. You can feel it. You're in a small candlelit kitchen, tucked into the back of a stone chapel. Outside, bells echo softly. Tomorrow marks the beginning of Lent. But tonight, there's still time for one last bowl of indulgence. On the table, cracked wheat, thick cream, a block of aged butter, honey so dark it's nearly black, and a small jar of dried fruits soaked in wine. You don't need a recipe. This is the kind of dish that lives in muscle memory. A farewell to flavor. A porridge of parting. You start with the cracked wheat, toasting it gently over a low flame. It pops and snaps like it's eager to begin. You add water, just enough to coax it into softening. Then, the cream thick and golden, followed by a generous knob of butter that melts with theatrical flair. The smell is intoxicating. Sweet, fatty, warm. You add the fruits, now plump and flushed with wine, and finish with a drizzle of honey that runs like molasses across the top. Widely known historical fact. On the eve of Lent, many Christian communities would prepare rich meals with ingredients that would be forbidden for the next 40 days. Dairy, sugar, meat. These final feasts were often communal, and porridge was a common vessel for the last bits of luxury. Eccentric curiosity. Some traditions included writing blessings or confessions on small pieces of bread that were then crumbled into the porridge. A literal way of digesting one's sins. Though arguably not very hygienic, historians still debate how universal these pre-Lenten porridges were across Europe. Some argue they were regional, while others suggest they evolved independently, as practical solutions to clearing out pantries before fasting. The porridge is thick now, glistening with cream and studded with fruit. You take a bite. It's rich, sweet, slightly boozy. The wheat still has bite. The honey clings to your tongue, and the butter gives everything a velvet softness. It's indulgent in the most gentle way, like wrapping yourself in a quilt that smells faintly of vanilla. You chew slowly, savoring. This porridge knows it's not coming back for a while. It isn't loud or showy. It's thankful, thoughtful, a little sad. You eat every bite. When the bowl is empty, you don't feel heavy, just full, content, ready. You set your spoon down and look toward the small chapel window. Outside, the moon is rising, quiet, white, watching. Tomorrow, the diet changes. The ingredients become simpler. But for tonight, you were allowed to remember, and that, somehow, makes the absence to come feel more bearable. You pull your blanket around your shoulders, letting the sweetness in your mouth soften into sleep. The air is different, now still, but not empty. You feel it in your breath, your posture, the weight of your spoon as you lift it one more time. You've come a long way, through smoky cottages, echoing monasteries, noble halls, and forgotten markets. But there's one bowl left, one final porridge. You find yourself in a quiet room, stone walls thick with time. A wooden table rests under a single flickering candle. No one else is here, just you and an old manuscript, unrolled gently. At the center of the table, the ink is faded, the parchment curled at the edges. But the recipe is legible, scratched in deliberate Latin script, with tiny annotations in the margins. It's not a list of ingredients, it's a story. It tells of a porridge made once every generation, a family rite, prepared in silence. Number, measurements, just steps, a handful of oats, a ladle of milk, a small apple, sliced thin, a few dried juniper berries, a whisper of nutmeg, and at the end, a silver coin dropped into the pot for luck. You gather the ingredients slowly, reverently. Each one feels heavy with meaning, not symbolic, just remembered. You heat the milk and add the oats, stirring gently. The apple slices go in next, curling as they soften. Then the berries, small and tart, their scent hinting at pine and something older. A shaving of nutmeg, just enough to warm the air. And last, the coin, a tarnished, dented silver piece. You lower it carefully into the pot. It vanishes beneath the surface with a soft plunk. Widely known historical fact, heirloom or ceremonial recipes were often passed through families or communities by oral tradition, especially in regions with low literacy. Many were seasonal or reserved for rites of passage. Eccentric curiosity, in certain Slavic and Northern European communities, coins or tokens were placed into porridge for luck during winter festivals. Whoever found the coin in their bowl was said to have fortune or responsibility for the coming year. Historians still debate the origin of this tradition. Some believe it traces back to pagan rituals. Others argue it evolved independently in multiple regions as a practical and playful custom. You stir the pot slowly, the porridge thickens, the apples dissolve slightly, the berries hold their shape. The scent is warm, quiet, a little sad, like a lullaby hummed by someone who's already half asleep. You serve yourself a bowl, knowing the coin remains in the pot for someone else. The taste is simple but layered. The oats are soft, the apple sweet, the berries sharp. The nutmeg lingers at the end, just enough to hold your attention. You eat slowly, and each bite feels like the closing of a chapter. When you're done, you leave the last spoonful in the pot, not out of politeness, but because the recipe said to, and now the fire is low. Your bowl is empty. The room is quiet. The only sound is the faint crackle of cooling embers and the soft hush of your own breath. Outside, the world keeps turning. But here, within these walls of grain and memory, time has slowed to a soft exhale. Each porridge was more than a meal, it was a moment. A gesture. A way of saying, I'm still here, even when the world was cold, or quiet, or too loud to bear. And in tasting them, one by one, you've moved gently through centuries of slow hunger and unexpected joy. You're safe now, wrapped in warmth, in history, in the kind of comfort that doesn't need to be exciting to matter. So let the weight of your body sink deeper into the blanket. Let your thoughts drift light as steam, soft as otand. Feel the silence settle over you like freshly fallen snow. No rush, no noise, just the soft rhythm of breath and the lingering taste of old recipes made new again. You're here, you're full, you're home. Sleep well.